Hey there, Dice Tower Nation, I am Jeff, your tabletop technician here in the Dice Tower, and today I'm super excited about this. I'm taking a look at Wild Distizonia Arena. This is a crazy new project from Dyerson Comet Wizards. In this beautiful deco bag building push your luck strategy game, players will take turns exploring the wild western Amazon rainforest, drawing weapons and ingredients from their own bag before using robots to sell whiskey to crocodiles. And not only that, but the player who manages to shoot the most bottles off of this waterfall here will gain these special gems worth tons of endgame points. Oh, hang on just one second here. Well, that was mean. Okay, well, I guess with that monkey wrench in the gears, I'll just review these 4 games separately. I played each of these games at the 2023 Dice Tower Retreat in Miami, Florida. And I had only played and already owned one of them. The other 3 I knew very little about, and each of them was a spontaneous decision to play. All of them, however, made quite a lasting impression on their first playthrough, which is why I've chosen to review them here. Up first was Wild Tiled West. Wild Tiled West by Direwolf is another in a growing selection of polyomino games, where players will be choosing from a narrow selection of oddly shaped tiles and placing them onto individual player boards, trying to accomplish a variety of objectives. And it's these often similar, sometimes repetitive, and occasionally frustrating aspects of these games that have always kept me at a bit of an arm's length. So many times polyomino games require you to fill an awkwardly shaped board with awkwardly shaped pieces, all while also trying to accomplish a variety of usually highly abstract challenges and or objectives, some of which are chucked at you annoyingly late into the game. And I'm looking at you, Isle of Cats. So what makes Wild Tiled West different from this mainstream formula? Well, not very much, if I'm honest. For example, players will still be placing awkwardly shaped pieces on their individual player boards. But they aren't just pressured to fill the entire board. Instead, there are areas on the board that will score points when filled in, representing a town in their western landscape. But in general, it is pretty difficult to completely fill this board anyways. Players will also have a number of challenges to work through, but these, to me at least, feel more thematic than in most polyomino games. You'll be placing fields filled with cattle, which you can eventually wrangle for points and rewards. You'll be connecting to mine shafts in order to increase your production of gold. You'll be placing sheriffs, which, with the help of some bullets, you can use to handle the occasional bandit that may decide to come round these parts. And players will also start with a partner card that provides endgame scoring based on a particular challenge, often with several tiers to aim for, such as having adjacent buildings, keeping them bandits under control, and more. Now, I will say that the method for obtaining these polyomino tiles isn't exactly my favorite system. This large display on the table is organized into rows and columns, with numbers appearing along the edges. At the start of each round, a number of dice are rolled based on the number of players, the dice are placed on the appropriate spaces, and in turn order, players will choose a tile closest to one of the dice. On the river columns, however, they can pay gold to claim jump, letting them choose a tile further away from the die if, of course, they can afford the price. This flexibility is nice, and there are a few other options available, such as the sawmill tile, which gives its owner a one-time ability to choose any tile from the display they want on one of their turns. I wouldn't mind even a bit more mitigation of the luck in this game, but I still enjoyed my first playthrough well enough that I picked up my own copy. Frankly, I was glad to see this level of production quality in a game that didn't start off as a crowdfunded project. Now, I won't go so far as to say that Wild Tiled West reinvents the polyomino wheel, but I'm tempted to say it's the most thematic polyomino game that I'm familiar with. And I'll agree with the folks at the studio that gave this game a 7.5 and the Dice Tower seal of approval. Now, Wild Tiled West certainly isn't a serious game, but it's definitely not as silly as the next game I want to talk about, Robot Quest Arena. This is published by Wise Wizard Games, makers of Star Realms and Hero Realms, both of which are deck-building brawler games. Robot Quest Arena is also a deck-building brawler game, but instead of simply playing cards against one another to chip away at a health value, players have physical, full-color robot miniatures on an actual play space, which will require them to maneuver into position, or utilize ranged weapons to cause damage to their opponents. I played this at the retreat with my good friends Katie and Greg of the Meeple Society, and we had a marvelous time engaging in friendly combat without any residual animosity whatsoever.
Jeff's a bully.
Jeff was a bully, yes.
Oh yeah? Well, you're a doo-doo head. What I loved most about Robot Quest Arena, besides repeatedly beating Greg with a hammer, was the fact that it's possibly the least frustrating take-that game I've ever played. See, when you damage an opponent, you remove these little health cubes from their player board, and those cubes then go to you in the form of victory points. If you take out a robot completely, the last blue cube of its health represents 2 victory points. But when a robot is taken out, it's removed from the board, and on that player's next turn, they simply respawn on the board with a fresh supply of health cubes, at least until the supply of blue cubes, which is set based on the number of players and the desired game length, is exhausted. I'm not usually a fan of brawler games, but this system is so clean, so simple, and so exciting that when you do get knocked off the board, you are suddenly so amped for your next opportunity to come running back into the arena, guns a-blazing. And every game of Robot Quest Arena is hilarious, jovial, and just plain silly. Now, I do wish that the deck building element of this game was just a little stronger. It's a little difficult to shed the starting cards from your hand, especially with that emphasis on racking up points as quickly as you can. I also do wish that this game could play with more than just 4 players, 5 on a stretch, but thankfully we've already heard rumors of an 11-player version coming to crowdfunding in 2024. Personally, I can't wait. I give Robot Quest Arena a 9, maintaining its already awarded Dice Tower seal of excellence. Now, robots are almost always powered by batteries, but what if you were interested in playing with something a little more flammable? Distilled by Paverson Games answers the burning question. What if making moonshine was really hard, quite a bit unpredictable, and generated almost no profit whatsoever? See, Distilled is the one game of these 4 that I've had for some time. Now, I really enjoyed my first few plays of it, and have possibly played this more times than the other 3 games combined. And yet, having played it twice at the retreat alone, teaching it 3 times, I'm really starting to think that I don't really like it that much after all. There's a lot going on in Distilled, a lot more than I can cover in a brief video amongst 3 other titles, but in short, players will be buying ingredients, equipment, recipes, and even upgrades for their distilleries before placing ingredients into a washback, where they'll then employ something of a push-your-luck mechanism to remove the heads and tails from their mash before determining which drink they successfully managed to distill. Selling drinks will reward players with both points and, if they're lucky, a little bit of money. Money, of course, is used to continue the cycle of buying more of all the above, while points will, hopefully, win them the game. This is all packaged into a brilliantly produced game with all the bells and whistles we've come to expect from expensive Kickstarter projects. And yet, through it all, I'm less and less convinced that the game makes sense. First of all, making money in Distilled is punishingly difficult, and since you need money to get better stuff to make more money, the game can have a painfully slow progression, if you ever really get it to progress in the first place. And this challenge can be compounded by the game's somewhat wonky market system. The market in Distilled consists of 2 distinct shops, the Advanced Market and the Basic Market. Players can purchase as many cards as they want from the Advanced Market, which will always have 4 options available across upgrades, ingredients, and equipment. But by default, players can only purchase 2 items from the Basic Market during each market phase. Not surprisingly, this market contains very basic ingredients and equipment, and yet is the only guaranteed source of any particular ingredient throughout the game. You might really need some yeast, maybe some water, but you might also need a barrel in order to produce that specialty whiskey you've been working towards. But if none of those components are currently available in the Advanced Market, all the money in the world won't let you acquire those 3 components from the Basic Market, even if it's your only option. I even asked Distilled's designer Dave Beck about this rule when I ran into him at PAX Unplugged earlier this month, and he agreed that, while this only 2 rule isn't wasn't exactly thematic, it had to be implemented because of some bonuses built into the water and yeast cards that trigger when they're purchased, and because of the fact that those cards, as well as the basic grain ingredient, can be acquired for free, and thus could be farmed indefinitely. Of course, the solution to that would seem to be a slight reworking of the game's economy, but I've started to wonder if the victory points themselves are the game's problem. I think Distilled would be far more fascinating if finished drinks rewarded just money, and a lot more of it, and if money at the end of the game was the determining factor in who won. Then players would have to choose wisely on how to invest in their distillery, making those purchasing decisions that much more impactful. Now, Dave did remind me that there's a rule that allows each player just before distilling a drink to trade any one ingredient they own for a different ingredient from the basic market of equal or lesser value, which could let you buy something cheap from the advanced market just to trade it in on a cheaper or even free ingredient from the basic market. But this is never going to feel like a rewarding decision for any player. So with that in mind, it's a little tough to say exactly where I stand on Distilled, which is hovering around a 7 for me right now. But I can tell you where I stand on Bad Comet's Life of the Amazonia, a bag and pattern building game set in the Amazon rainforest. I was wandering around the room at the retreat when I came across Tom Vassell playing this with some other attendees, and he asked if I had ever played it, which I hadn't. I had barely even heard of it, but he mentioned that so far he was pretty impressed with it. He was also wrapping up his game, so Katie, Greg, and I decided to quickly take advantage of the already set up game on the table and give it a go. Later on their podcast, I would go on to suggest that I told people this is like Altiplano and Cascadia's love child. Altiplano is also a bag builder, but unlike games like Orleans or Quacks of Quedlinburg, Altiplano and Life of the Amazonia has a discard tray. A tray where you place your used tokens drawn from your bag until your bag is empty and you need to draw more tokens. This of course means that Amazonia is really more of a deck builder than anything else, which is convenient since I really love deck builders. Of course, a deck builder where your cards simply gave you resources wouldn't be as exciting, so a bag with tokens makes a lot more sense here. And now I can tell you just what those tokens let you do. In short, players in Amazonia will be placing tiles to expand their forests, rivers, and marshes. They'll also be placing trees in those forests and flowers in those rivers by spending resources to climb these 3 tracks on this unique, if not admittedly pointless, 3D waterfall display. Along the way, they'll be attracting frogs, birds, monkeys, and more to their rainforest, all in the interest of creating patterns out of all these pieces that will score points based on the desires of each animal. Ironic that it is now currently pouring rain here in Ashland, Virginia. Anyways, of course there's a bit more to this game, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to cut it apart about why this is my number 1 game of 2023. First, the presentation is simply fantastic. The screen printed animals are wonderful, the card art is superb, and while yes, the waterfall display has no real need to be 3D, it's just awesome. But that's the easy stuff. No, what I really like is that each player gets a unique animal to start the game off with, each of which takes an initial requirement to be placed into your rainforest, but then provides a unique ability to its owner for the rest of the game. I also like these 2 small decks of scenery and insect cards, the first of which gives endgame points based on specific requirements, and the latter of which players can purchase on their turn for an immediate and often quite powerful one-time effect. But perhaps my favorite little rule of this game, which we even missed in our first playthrough, is that a player can at any point during their turn spend 2 of any token to provide 1 of any other type of resource. This on its surface seems so insignificant and perhaps even wasteful to spend high-value chips as a one-shot wild token, but this little rule can be the make-or-break difference between pulling off some huge combo move. Buying this insect card to go up this track, which then lets you place this tile, which you can then cover up this symbol to give you this bonus, letting you then afford this animal, placing it on that new tile to get this additional placement bonus, and in a single desperate move, racking up a dozen or more points. Life of the Amazonia gives players many opportunities to feel brilliantly clever, and it is a super satisfying puzzle to wrap your head around, which is why I will again gladly echo my friends Camilla and Mike on their 9 out of 10 Seal of Excellence rating. Now, it is worth mentioning that these were just 4 of 35 different games I played at the retreat, and they weren't the only ones that made a positive impression on me, which means you might just want to stick around for some more one-off reviews. Until then, cheers. And not only that, but the player who manages to shoot the most bottles off of this waterfall. No, Tom, I wasn't ready yet.